Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I've always been proud of how my dad handled this situation at my mom's company Christmas party several years ago. Let me give you some context first. My mom had been working at this corporate consulting firm for about 8 years at that point, and she'd worked her way up to becoming a supervisor. She managed a team of 12 people, and while most of them were great, there was this one woman who'd been there longer than my mom and was clearly bitter about not getting the promotion herself. She'd made my mom's first few months as supervisor particularly difficult, constantly questioning her decisions and making snide remarks during team meetings. The Christmas party that year was being held at this fancy hotel downtown. My dad came as my mom's plus one, as he always did. He worked in construction management, spending a lot of time outdoors supervising projects, which gave him this permanent tan even in winter. With his jet black hair and tan skin, people often mistook him for being from various ethnic backgrounds, though he's actually of English and Irish descent, with maybe a touch of German somewhere in there. The party was going great. There was an open bar, good food, and everyone was having a good time. Around 11 p.m. my mom needed to grab some work documents from her office a few floors up, so she, my dad, and a few of her colleagues headed to the elevator. That's when it happened. This bitter employee who'd had way too much to drink started going on this horrible rant about Mexican immigrants. She began by loudly complaining about how they were everywhere now. Then she started ranting about how they were stealing jobs, claiming her nephew couldn't get work at a construction site because they hired Mexicans who would work for less. She even had the audacity to mock their English, saying that if they were in America, they should speak American. As the elevator kept moving up, her rant got increasingly offensive and personal, bringing up harmful stereotypes and making sweeping generalizations. My dad just stood there, quietly listening, while my mom's other colleagues, two of whom were actually Mexican-American, looked incredibly uncomfortable. The tension in that elevator was thick enough to cut with a knife. Just as the elevator reached our floor and the doors started opening, my dad turned to her and told her that his father was Mexican. She went pale as a ghost, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. She started stammering out apologies, saying she didn't know and didn't mean it, clearly mortified by what she'd done. My dad's response was simply to walk out of the elevator without another word. My dad isn't Mexican at all, not even a little bit, but the other colleagues who knew this kept quiet, letting her stew in her mortification. For the next 6 months, she went out of her way to apologize to my mom almost every day. She would constantly express how terrible she felt about what she'd said at the party, begging my mom to pass on her apologies to my dad. She started bringing authentic Mexican pastries from a new downtown bakery, asking my mom to give them to my husband. My mom would just nod and accept the treats while hiding her smile. The woman even told my mom she'd signed up for Spanish classes at the community college because she wanted to understand the culture better. The woman even started volunteering at the local Hispanic community center on weekends. She would tell everyone about how she was educating herself and working to overcome her prejudices. What started as an attempt to make amends actually turned into a genuine passion for community service. She eventually left the company for another job, never knowing the truth. My mom's Mexican-American colleagues still bring up this story at company gatherings, calling it the best karma they've ever witnessed. One of them later told us that her volunteer work at the community center had made a real difference. She'd helped organize fundraisers, tutored English language learners, and even helped several families navigate the citizenship application process. The impact of my dad's quick thinking went far beyond just teaching her a lesson. My dad's little white lie did more to change her perspective than any amount of arguing could have done. She's never made another racist comment since that Christmas party. I recently moved into this nice apartment building downtown. The rent is a bit steep, but the security features made it worth it. Or so I thought until I met my neighbor, who I'll call Karen. From the day I moved in, she'd been oddly interested in my deliveries, always lingering in the hallway whenever packages arrived for anyone on our floor. It all began when I ordered this expensive graphics card. I've been saving up for months, and with a chip shortage finally easing up, I managed to snag one at retail price. I was tracking the package obsessively and got a notification that it had been delivered while I was at work. The delivery notification included a photo of the package safely placed at my door, and I could see Karen's door cracking open in the background of the picture. I wasn't too worried since I had a doorbell camera installed when I moved in. The building itself was secure and only residents could get in. But something felt off that day, so I checked the live feed during my lunch break. My co-workers gathered around my desk as I pulled up the feed, and we all watched at what unfolded. That's when I saw it. Karen from apartment 4B ducking behind her door, poking at my package with a broomstick like she was playing some deranged version of hockey. She thought she was being clever by hiding behind her door, but my 4K camera caught her face perfectly every time she peeked out to see if she was making progress. She had even put on a hat and sunglasses, as if that would somehow fool a camera pointed directly at her face. I immediately left work and rushed home, my supervisor completely understanding after watching the bizarre scene on my phone. When I got there, Karen was still at it, now cursing under her breath because the package was too heavy to drag with just a broomstick. She'd actually tied two brooms together to extend her reach, making the whole scene even more ridiculous. I asked her what she thought she was doing with my package. She jumped like she'd seen a ghost, dropping the broomstick contraption with a loud clatter. Her sunglasses fell off, completely ruining her poorly thought-out disguise. She immediately started yelling that it was her package and that she'd been waiting for it all day. When I questioned why she was trying to fish it from my doorstep with a broomstick if it was really hers, she denied everything. She claimed she was just cleaning and accused me of harassing her. Then she tried to change her story, saying she was actually trying to protect my package from porch pirates and I should be thanking her. She started screaming like a banshee, and that's when things got weird. She pulled out a screwdriver from her pocket. Who just carries around a screwdriver? And stabbed herself in the thigh. I later found out she'd specifically bought the screwdriver that morning from the hardware store down the street, as if she'd been planning this whole scene. Karen started screaming for help, accusing me of stabbing her and trying to steal what she claimed was her package. Several neighbors came out and Karen was putting on quite the performance, rolling around and wailing. She'd even brought fake blood packets with her, which burst and made the whole scene look much more dramatic than it was. One of my neighbors called the police while another tried to help Karen with her wound. A neighbor demanded to know what I had done to her. I told them to check my door camera, explaining that it had recorded everything. Karen immediately started screaming not to listen to me, insisting I was lying and begging them to call the police. She even tried to reach up and yank my doorbell camera off the wall, but she couldn't reach it. When the police arrived, I showed them my phone with the doorbell camera app. They watched the whole thing, from Karen's failed attempt at package theft to her self-inflicted dramatics. One officer kept chuckling at her broomstick fishing technique, particularly the part where she tied the two brooms together. His partner had to step away to maintain professional composure. The officer told her that attempting to steal packages was a federal offense. Karen frantically denied it was her in the video, screaming that I had doctored it and was trying to frame her. She even claimed she had a twin sister who was trying to frame her. The officer explained that the footage was time-stamped and authenticated, and they could clearly see her stabbing herself with a screwdriver. Karen completely lost it. She tried to make a run for it, swinging her fists at anyone who got close. She even tried to use one of her brooms as a weapon. It took two officers to restrain her as she kicked and screamed all the way to the police car, leaving a trail of fake blood and real regret. Turns out she had quite a record. Multiple complaints of package theft in her previous apartment complex, but they could never prove it because they didn't have cameras. She'd been evicted from 3 different buildings in the past 2 years. The property management company had received several complaints about missing packages over the past few months. After reviewing my footage, they checked the building's security cameras and found plenty of evidence of Karen's other thefts. They discovered she'd been running a small business reselling stolen packages online. They evicted her immediately and helped other residents file police reports for their missing items. And my graphics card is running beautifully in my PC. I made sure to wave at Karen through my window as she was moving out. She threw a shoe at my window, but the reinforced glass just made it bounce back and hit her moving truck. Perfect karma. I've been volunteering at our local food pantry for about 3 years now. After losing my job during the economic downturn and struggling to make ends meet, the pantry helped me get through some really tough times. Once I got back on my feet and landed a better job than before, I knew I had to give back to the community that supported me. So here I am, dedicating my weekends to helping others who might be going through similar situations. My main role is coordinating with local grocery stores and managing inventory. We run a pretty efficient operation. Volunteers pick up donations, we sort them, and make sure everything gets distributed fairly. The hardest part of the job is in the physical work. It's dealing with people who try to take advantage of the system. Today was one of those days. I was doing my usual inventory check when this woman walked in. Right from the start, something felt off about her. She barely acknowledged any of us and went straight for the shelves, grabbing bags of groceries like she was on a shopping spree. What really caught my attention was when she started hoarding all the coffee. Now, coffee might seem like a luxury item to some, but for many of our visitors, it's their only small comfort, especially those working multiple jobs or night shifts. One of our volunteers approached her first and politely explained that she was taking too much coffee, mentioning that we needed to ensure there was enough for everyone. The woman just brushed off the concern, saying she had a big family to feed. Another volunteer tried reasoning with her, acknowledging that while we understood her situation, many families relied on our services. They asked if she could please leave some coffee for others. She dismissed this request too, insisting that her family went through coffee very quickly and really needed it all. She seemed to leave after that. Barely 5 minutes later, she was back. And guess what she was doing? Making a beeline straight for the coffee section again. That's when I lost my patience. I walked right up to her and told her that her behavior was completely unacceptable, reminding her that we had just explained the need to leave items for others. As I spoke, I started taking the coffee packages out of her bags. She protested loudly, claiming I couldn't do that and insisting she needed those items. I explained that what she was doing was taking food from other struggling families. I gave her the address for the donation center downtown, suggesting they might be able to provide additional help. She started making excuses, saying she didn't drive and didn't have a job, asking how I expected her to get to the donation center. She kept repeating that she had a big family to feed. When I asked if nobody in her family had a job or a car, she fell silent. I told her about my own experience, explaining that I had been on both sides of this counter and knew what it was like to struggle, but what she was doing was pure greed. That's when things got interesting. Another patron who had been quietly watching suddenly spoke up, revealing that she knew this woman from their apartment complex. She exposed that the woman's adult children all had cars and jobs, and they were always having parties. The woman's face turned bright red, and she stormed out, leaving her bags behind. We ended up implementing a new sign-out system after that incident. Now everyone has to register what they take, and we keep track of frequent visitors. We also started a coffee donation drive specifically because of this incident. Local coffee shops stepped up, and now we actually have more coffee than before. The woman never showed up again, but I heard her struggling family was actually quite well off, and she had been reselling items from various food pantries online. The donation center downtown got an anonymous tip about her activities, and last I heard, she was banned from every food bank in the county. My grandmother always insists on sending checks instead of digital transfers during our birthdays because she believes they're more personal. Usually I deposit them through my banking app, but this time the check was too large for mobile deposit. grandmother had been extra generous for my 30th. I rarely visit physical banks anymore. The one closest to my apartment had closed down during the pandemic, so I had to drive across town to find another branch that was still open. The timing wasn't great either. It was lunch hour on a Friday, and I had a work meeting in 45 minutes. But I figured it wouldn't take too long. The line wasn't long, only 4 people ahead of me, but it was moving at a glacial pace. To pass the time, I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through Reddit. That's when I noticed the woman in front of me. She was doing this exaggerated dance of impatience, shifting from one foot to another, tapping her boots on the floor, and letting out these theatrical sighs every 30 seconds. At first, I tried to ignore her, but then she suddenly turned around to face me and asked if they had an automated teller machine. I looked up from my phone and looked around the bank, telling her I had no idea since I couldn't see one. I tried to go back to scrolling, hoping that would be the end of our interaction. It wasn't. She pressed on, asking whether the ATM was inside or outside. I had to explain again that I didn't know since I didn't work there. She gave me this look like I just told her the earth was flat and asked sarcastically if I didn't bank here. I told her no, not usually. She fell silent for a moment, but then she started up again, asking me about interest rates for savings accounts since she was trying to open a new account. I looked at her completely baffled by her persistence and explained once more that I didn't bank here regularly and this was literally my first time at this branch. I was just there to cash a check. She got upset then, raising her voice to tell me I could be more helpful and that she was just trying to make conversation. Her voice had risen enough that other people in line were starting to stare. A bank employee who had been organizing some papers at a nearby desk quickly approached us and offered to help her with any questions about their services, asking if she'd like to step over to their desk. The woman snapped back about how finally someone knew how to do their job. She shot me one last glare before following the bank employee. When she walked away, I could hear her complaining about how young people these days have no sense of community or helpfulness. The elderly gentleman behind me in line leaned forward to commend my handling of the situation. He revealed that she'd been there 3 times that week, doing the same thing each time. When I expressed my surprise, he explained that he comes every Wednesday to deposit his pension check and had witnessed her behavior before. He told me about how the previous week she had tried to convince someone to let her cut in line because she claimed to only have a quick question about mortgage rates. We shared a knowing look and chuckled. A few minutes later, I watched as Karen stormed out of the bank, clutching her purse without opening an account. The bank employee who had helped her caught my eye and gave me an apologetic smile. When I finally reached the front of the line, I could see Karen through the bank's front window, trying to find the ATM she'd been so concerned about. She walked around the building twice before getting into her luxury SUV and speeding away. The teller who helped me was extra friendly, perhaps to make up for the earlier drama. As she processed my grandmother's check, we chatted about how some people seem to thrive on creating chaos wherever they go. She mentioned that they actually did have an ATM. It was just temporarily out of order and covered with a sign that read, "Out of service" in large red letters. All that fuss about an ATM she wouldn't have been able to use anyway. At least I got a good story out of it for Reddit. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.